He went to her house and asked her to sign the divorce papers. She was smiling a lot as she talked, saying, sign the divorce papers. You will be very happy. We can even celebrate, then in front of him. She smiled a lot as she said this, and I cried, desperate without knowing what was going on. I thought back to my childhood, when I lived in Santos with my father and mother. I was a newborn, and I don't know exactly what occurred, because I met my parents a few years later. He went to her house and asked her to sign the divorce papers. She was a kind woman who smiled a lot and said, sign the divorce papers, and you will be very happy. We can even celebrate in front of him. I was crying, desperate and confused. I didn't know what was going on. I grew up in Santos, living with my father and mother. I don't know exactly what happened, because when I met my parents, it was 8 years later, so each had a different version of the story. In the end, my mother decided to give me to a family. She was kind and never came back. When she gave me to this family, I was already very Jewish because of my stepfather, who didn't like me. He beat me. He treated me like a dog, worse than a dog, forcing me to eat on the floor. My mother gave me to another family. I was created in a world where 8 years is a long time, and each person's version of the story is different. In the end, my mother decided to give me to a family, and I was never able to see her again. When she gave me to this family, I was already very Jewish because of my stepfather, who didn't like me. He used to beat me, and he treated me like a dog. I was even worse than a dog, and I had to eat on the floor. Then, my mother gave me to another family. I was adopted, and I didn't have that feeling of love. Everyone was my mother. Everyone wanted to send me away, and everyone wanted to fight me. I wanted to hit back. Some things happened that weren't cool, and I ended up leaving home at 14. I went to live on the street. At that moment, I was 14 years old, and I suffered a lot. I was abused, and I slept at the train station. I ate the rest of the food, but I didn't feel loved by everyone, and that made me feel really sad. There were some really tough times, and I ended up leaving home when I was 14. I had a hard time, and I was really abused. I slept in train stations, and I ate whatever food I could find. But every day, I asked God that I didn't want to stay in that life. Then, I finally got the chance to turn things around. It wasn't easy, though. I spent almost 2 years living on the street. Every day, I slept in abandoned houses to find a plate of food. Then, I met Prime, my first husband, who is the father of my children. He took me from the street and helped me get into a workshop. I asked God every day that I didn't want to stay in that life. Then, my journey began. It was not easy. I spent almost 2 years living on the streets. Every day, I slept in an abandoned house, hoping to find a plate of food. Then, I met Prime, my first husband, who is the father of my children. He took me from the street and worked in a workshop near a restaurant. I went to work there and met him. He practically took me out of the street. We lived for 10 years and separated. I had 2 young children. After my studies, I went back to school and took my children with me at night. I left them in daycare centers during the day. At night, I went to school. I cleaned houses and took both children with me. I had a really nice experience working at a restaurant near there. I met a really nice guy who gave me a ride out of the street. We lived together for 10 years, but then we separated. I had 2 young kids, and I didn't have a car. After I finished my studies, I went back to school and took my kids with me at night. I left them at daycare during the day. At night, I went to school. I was cleaning houses and taking my kids with me to school, because I wanted to change my life. I finished my studies and started working for a company as a production assistant. Then, I got a job in São Bernardo at Bombril, so I left almost every day from Mogi to work in São Bernardo at 4 a.m. I left my kids with my ex-husband so I could work. Often, I had to pay someone to take care of them. I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to make a change in my life. I finished my studies and started working in production assistant roles. Then, I got a job at Bombril in São Bernardo, which meant leaving Mogi almost every day, at 4 a.m. to work in São Bernardo. I'd leave my children with my ex-husband to be able to work, and often I had to pay someone to take care of them, because I'd arrive in the afternoon, or at night, and I'd work 2 shifts from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. Many times, when I arrived at 10 p.m., the buses had already left. I'd stay at the point until 2 a.m., waiting for the next bus. Many times, the police gave me a ride home. They'd take me out of the street and drop me off. I'd arrive in the afternoon or evening, and sometimes by the time I got there, the bus had already left. I'd have to wait for the next one, which was sometimes as late as 2 a.m. Thankfully, the police would sometimes give me a ride. I had no way to leave, and I needed to work to support my children. I didn't have a support network, and I didn't have family who could help me in this area. I really needed the job, and that's how I met my second husband one day. I was catching a train, and he was coming back from work. We bumped into each other on the train. He was teaching at the university. I couldn't leave, because I needed to support my children. I didn't have a support network or family to help me. I really needed the job. One day, I was catching a train when I met my second husband. He was a teacher at a university. I was coming back from work when we met. We started talking and became close. We started dating and got involved. We were together every day until one day he said, "I passed the CPTM contest. I'm living in Osasco. Do you want to come with me?" I saw an opportunity to. We met at the factory where we both worked. We started talking and became close. Then, in 2013, we started dating. We were inseparable, and I even started working with him. We were together every day, until one day I told him I had won a contest. I was living in Osasco at the time, and he wanted to move there with me. I saw an opportunity to change my life, so I went to live with him in Osasco. We looked for a place to live together. We were both so happy. He was the perfect man. He did everything to please me. I gave him everything, and he supported me. At one point, he told me he wanted me to leave the company, because he wanted me to study. He wanted me to work. Then, I saw an opportunity to study more. We decided to move in together, and I started a new job. We were both working hard to make our relationship work. He was very attentive to me, and I felt appreciated. I was working long hours, and he encouraged me to pursue my studies. I saw an opportunity to advance my career, so I decided to leave the company. My children and I were not very close with my ex-husband. However, I felt a strong connection to him. I visited Mogi and my children at their father's house one weekend. I also took them to stay with me in Osasco. They were already quite grown up, but they weren't interested in being with me. They thought my ex-husband was strange. I decided to move in with him. My children and I weren't as close with this guy. They seemed to have some sort of connection, but I couldn't quite figure out what it was. During the weekend, I went to see them at their father's house, and they were there when Osasco took them to stay with me. They were already quite grown up by then, but they weren't interested in being with me. They thought my ex-husband was strange, and I started living with him. I quit my job, and he didn't let me work more. At first, I wanted to work in radiology, but he said that wasn't possible, because I was going to work in a hospital and wouldn't have time for him. I wouldn't have time to get pregnant, and I didn't have time for anything else. So, he decided to study aesthetics, and I was happy to support that choice. I quit my job, and he didn't want me to work more. At first, I wanted to work in radiology, but he said that I shouldn't because I was going to work at the hospital, and I wouldn't have time for anything else. I didn't want to get pregnant, so I didn't. I didn't have time for anything, so he decided to study aesthetics. I didn't want to do that, but I ended up enjoying it. I was studying and doing well, so I dropped everything to study. It was a perfect fit, it was wonderful. It was the dream every woman has. He took me out of jobs, moved me from my family and children, and automatically, I went to have this perception. I moved away, and my friends only lived near me. He treated me well because he left early. He went to work for CPTM, and I was going to teach a class at the university. I spent the day studying at home, and for me, everything was wonderful, it was a dream come true. The weekend was always perfect, and we were always traveling and walking. He would say, "You either don't want to go to your hair salon, or your nail salon. Go there and do these things. I'll stay here studying, correcting proof, and that." He went to work for CPTM right away, and I was going to teach a class at the university. I spent the day studying at home, and everything was wonderful. It was a dream come true, and the weekend was perfect. We always traveled and walked there. He said to me, "You either don't want to go to your hair salon, or get your nails done. Go there and do these things. I'll stay here studying and correcting the proofreading." I thought it was perfect when I started. I don't say it's the wrong thing to do. I think I opened a door that was not meant to be. In the background, I felt a little guilty, because when I arrived in Osasco, I had no friends. I missed them, so I went to a salon to meet people. There, I met a manicurist, and I became friends with her. Then, I thought, well, When I started, everything was perfect. I don't think it was wrong, though. I think I opened a door to something good. I also felt a little guilty, because when I arrived in Osasco, I had no friends. I missed them, so I went to a salon to meet people. There, I met a manicurist who became a friend. I thought, well, she's married, and that's good because my husband will have a friend too. We started to become friends, and then I put this friend in my house. She practically lived my life, probing everything I did. I told her everything, right? I opened all my universe for her, from my wedding, to things I did, to where I was going, and she lived in my house the whole weekend. I'm so glad my husband has a friend now. He doesn't have anyone here, so it's nice to have someone to spend time with. We've become friends, and I'm happy to have her in my life. I've been sharing everything with her, and she's been a great support. She's been coming over every weekend, and we've been hanging out with couples. I've been doing all the cooking and hosting parties, and it's been great to have her around. I've realized that she's been spending a lot of time at my place, and I'm not leaving my house for myself anymore. She's like a sister to me. I've always been a bit needy, and now I have someone to take care of me like a sister. But I've been thinking about it, and some people have warned me about it. We spent a lot of time together, and I was always on the phone or in the car, or sometimes just hanging out at my house. I didn't realize that she was so important to me. I thought she was just like a sister to me. I thought she was taking care of me like a sister, but then I had a realization. Some people had already warned me about this, but I didn't take it seriously. I thought, wow, this person doesn't understand that she wants to be my friend, because it was Christmas and we were together. I never realized that my ex-husband was that kind of man. He didn't leave to play ball, and he didn't go out to drink with friends. He lived at home and worked at home, so it was hard to trust him. I was worried because I thought that this person didn't understand that it was a friend she wanted to be with me, because it was Christmas, a party, and everything she was with. I never realized that I was envious of my ex-husband. He was the kind of man who didn't leave to play ball. He didn't go out to drink with friends. He lived at home and worked at home. He was a man of integrity. As soon as I had no friends, I never saw him with friends. He never left if he didn't go with me. He never gave me any evidence of his whereabouts. She started coming to my house until I found out where my father was, right over the internet. I had to go to Christmas to meet my father, and she was always on my side, supporting everything. I called my dad, and he was everything exciting. After 38 years, I finally met my father. I had no friends at first, and he was always by my side. He never left if he didn't have to. He never gave me any signs that he was struggling. He started coming to my house, and I found out where my father was through the internet. I had to go to Christmas to meet my father, and she was always by my side, supporting me. I called my dad, and he was everything to me. After 38 years, meeting my father was a dream come true. I have my grandmother, my grandfather, my cousin, and everything there. My husband was supportive and said, "Let's go there. Set the tickets. Let's get to know your father. You have to go." So, we went to travel, and she and her husband went to pick us up at the airport with friends. She was always participating in everything, and it was wonderful. In 2016, I met my father, and he met my family. Everyone cried. I had a dream that my father, grandfather, and cousin were there, and so was my husband. He said, "Let's go there. Set the tickets. Let's get to know your father. You have to go. Your father needs to return to work." We went to travel, and he and his husband took us to the airport to travel with friends. We always participated in everything, and it was wonderful. In 2016, I met my father, and he met my family. Everyone cried. He just needed to return to be able to work, and he and I wanted to stay longer to meet people. So I told you, I will spend another week, and you come back. He came back alone. From there, it all started because it is first. He always called me to know if he was all right. As there was the tour, suddenly he started to pass. This time, I called him, and he didn't answer. I was like, distancing. Then, had he said he needed to return to work, but he and I wanted to stay longer to meet people. So, I told him I'd stay an extra week, and he'd come back with me. He came back alone, though. That's when everything started. He'd always call me to check if I was okay. Then, suddenly, he started to stop calling. I called him, but he didn't answer. I was worried, so I asked him if he was okay. He sent me the money for the ticket back, and he said this had happened. He said he was sending the money for the ticket, but I didn't understand what was going on. I put on my alert when he sent the money for the ticket, and I returned. I expected him to pick me up. "I miss you." I was there for almost 20 or 30 days. He went with her and her husband to pick me up. I didn't have any money, so I asked him for help. He was so kind and sent me the money for the ticket. I didn't understand what was going on, but I was grateful. When he sent the money, I lit a candle for good luck. I was expecting him to pick me up, but he didn't. "I miss you." It had been almost 20 or 30 days since I was there. He went with her and her husband to pick me up at the airport. When I went down to the airport lobby, I found that he was going to meet me. She went to my meeting, and he stayed in the car with her husband. I thought it was strange, but I didn't say anything. When I arrived, I saw beer cans. I didn't understand why. The dawn flight had arrived from the night before. I looked at them, and they were coming from a birthday party. Then, her husband and she sat in the front seat. I was at the airport, and when I got to the lobby, I saw that he was going to meet me. She went to my meeting, and he stayed in the car with her husband. I thought it was a little strange, but I didn't say anything. When I arrived, I saw beer cans everywhere, and I didn't understand why. I got the early flight from the morning. I looked at them, and they were coming from a birthday party, and then her husband. She sat in the front seat, and he called out, "Let's celebrate." I talked, but I was tired. I had just arrived on a trip, and I wanted to go home. Then she insisted that we stay for this party, and I said, "I don't want to." I didn't like it anymore, and I didn't expect this. Then she stopped being silly, and soon you will have a baby. She released this vain being, and she was very happy. She sat in the back, and he said, "Let's celebrate my birthday." I said I was tired and wanted to go home, but she insisted that we stay for the party. I said I didn't want to, but I didn't expect this. Then, she suddenly stopped being silly and said, "You will have a baby soon. You will be very happy." I didn't understand what she meant at first, but as soon as I arrived on a trip and not on a trip, I understood. I told him I didn't want to go to a party. I wanted to go home. She gave me a strange look, but I felt like I had an intuition. She stayed at the party with her husband. I left, and I saw that he was strange. The other day, I saw that he was strange, all right. If you get pregnant, you'll have a baby who says things. As soon as I understood that, I realized I had just arrived on a trip and didn't know what would happen. I told him I didn't want to go to a party. I wanted to go home. From there, I already had one. I had an intuition, but I wasn't sure. She stayed at the party with her husband. I left and saw that he was acting strangely. The other day, he went to work, acting strangely, and then came home asking for a divorce. He went to her house, called her husband, and asked for a divorce. She smiled a lot and talked, saying, "Sign this divorce. You'll be very happy. We can even celebrate in front of him and her husband." She smiled a lot, and I cried, desperate and without knowing what to think. I didn't claim anything. I simply asked for a divorce in front of them. She smiled at me, and I cried. He went to work one day, and he was acting very strangely. Then, he came back and asked for a divorce. He went to her house and asked her to sign the divorce papers. She was smiling a lot and talking to me. She said, "Sign these divorce papers, and you will be very happy. We can even celebrate in front of him and her husband." She smiled a lot, and I cried. I was desperate and didn't know what to do. I didn't say anything. I just asked for a divorce in front of them. She smiled at me, and I cried. I remember that day like it was today. I was nothing. Why was that happening? I was talking to myself, and I was going to be very well. He was going to give me a lot of money. I was going to rent a house and stay single. That was going to be better for me. I didn't understand anything. That was the worst humiliation I ever experienced. Then, we started the discussion. They were, although, because I put everyone to. The other day, he went to work, and you didn't return home. I was blocked and left alone in the apartment. I didn't even have a lawyer, but he already had one, and she already knew his lawyer. She had passed this information to the pro hairdresser that I had arranged a lawyer with, and she knew who his lawyer was. He had already searched for his certificate of birth, and I was sorry, but I stayed. The other day, he went to work, and you didn't return home. I was blocked and left alone in the apartment. I didn't even have a lawyer. He already had one, and she already knew that he was going to arrange a lawyer, because she had already passed on the information to the pro hairdresser that I was going to have a lawyer. She knew who his lawyer was, and he had already searched for his birth certificate. I went to look for it, but it wasn't there. He had already gone to the lawyer that she arranged for him. He blocked me there. I went crazy. I went to Mogi and asked for help, because I thought I knew more. I stayed there, and he missed her too. When I was in Mogi, a neighbor from the condominium called and asked, "Marie, you are changing." I said, "No, but here's your husband," to her friend and her husband making the. When I got to the apartment, I couldn't find the documents anywhere. I asked around, and luckily, a neighbor from the condo told me that she had seen him with a lawyer. I was worried sick, so I went to Mogi to ask for help. While I was there, a neighbor from the condo called me. She said, "Marie, you are changing." I told her no, but she insisted, and she told me that her husband and his friend were making the change. I only had my clothes and my documents with me in Mogi. I asked, "How so?" They were already removing everything from the apartment. Then, I ran from Mogi to Osasco. When I got there, they had just come out with the truck. A neighbor spoke to the police, and then I called the policeman. He arrived, and I stayed in shock. I just cried because everything was empty. I sat on the floor, crying. I called the police, and the policeman a truck of change. I asked, my voice cracking with emotion. "What do you mean, they are removing everything?" "A lot of people are already doing that in the apartment." I hurried from Mogi to Osasco. When I arrived, they had just unloaded the truck. My neighbor spoke to the police, and I called the policeman. I was in a state of shock, sitting on the floor and crying. "What a cowardly man," the policeman said. "If we had arrived at the time, we would have had to apply the Maria da Penha law, and he would have had to take everything out of the truck again." My neighbor went up, and I went to call my friend, thinking she was the only one I had there. I asked my neighbor for my mother's cell phone, and she said she was not her friend. I was lost, and I said, "How so?" I said, "What a cowardly man." We were so close to applying the Maria da Penha law to him, and he would have had to take everything out of the truck again. My neighbor went up, and I went to call my friend, thinking she was the only friend I had there to ask for my mother's cell phone. She said she was not her friend, and I was confused. I said, "How so? What are you talking about?" "I'll tell you something. While you were traveling, I saw her with her husband in a cafeteria. They were together when a bomb fell over me." I said, "How so?" "I don't understand what you mean." She said, "I was with him there." I was disturbed by all that information. I didn't have all the information just yet, and everything was very recent. Then I said, "But the husband." I was in a really tough spot. I said, "How do you mean? What are you talking about?" She replied, "While you were traveling, I saw her with her husband in a cafeteria. They were together, and it felt like a bomb fell over me." I said, "How so?" "I don't understand what you mean." She said, "I was with him." I was really disturbed by all that information. I didn't have much, and I just arrived on the trip. Everything was very recent. I said, "But her husband wasn't with her." She said, "Not only was I with him, but he was with me." I was in shock. I thought, there I was, in the middle of it all. I didn't know if it was true or a lie. I was confused, and then she started to call the cell phone. The neighbor said, "Serves this woman right." I called to monitor what I was going to do to pass it to him. She was monitoring all the time to see what would happen. She wasn't with him, and he wasn't with her. I was there, and I was in shock. I was in shock. I thought that if it was true, if it was a lie, I was confused. Then, she started to call the cell phone. The neighbor said that this woman is no good for her. I called to monitor what I was going to do to pass it to him. She was monitoring all the time to see what I would do if I went to the police station, if I was going to look for a lawyer to inform him of what I was going to do. And then I had to go to Mogi and stay at others' houses, because I didn't have a place to go. There was no money. There was nothing. I had to sell my wedding ring to be able to eat. I had to stay in the street for a day, because I didn't even have neighbors who welcomed me there. Then, a friend later, if I had gone to the police station to look for a lawyer to inform him of my plans, I would have had to go to Mogi and stay at someone's house, because I didn't have a place to stay. I had no money, no belongings, and no way to support myself. I had to sell my alliance to buy food for my wedding, and I had to stay in the street for a day, because I didn't have any neighbors who welcomed me. Then, a friend later, I went to another friend, and he kindly gave me some clothes. He took all my things and played in Mogi at my father's children's home. After he took my things, he played everything at his father's house. I was just a helpless creature, a dizzy cockroach, behind my things until I had to get a lawyer to have my things returned to me. It took 6 months to get my things back. I was just donating clothes until then. I was not sure that he was with her. I went to another friend, and he kindly let me stay with him while I sorted out the situation. He was very understanding and helpful, and he even let me use his phone to take photos of the things that belonged to me. I was so grateful for his support. Eventually, I decided to hire a lawyer to help me get my things back. It was a long process, but I finally got my things back after 6 months. During that time, I was not sure if he was with her. I was not sure what was going on. Nothing passed the time, and I went to court to start the divorce process. It was a lot of work, and it was tiring because my lawyer was fighting on one side, and his lawyer was fighting on the other. On the day of the audience, he claimed that he took my things, and then his lawyer argued with my lawyer. He arranged a lawyer who later spoke to me. I decided not to take his case, and he gave up on me. I was confused and didn't know what to do, so I went to court to file for divorce. It was a lot to take in, and it was tiring because my lawyer was fighting with his own lawyer. On the day of the court hearing, he said that he took things to the next level. Then, the lawyer he had already argued with arranged a different lawyer to speak with me. I decided not to take his case, and he gave up on me. Then, he arranged another lawyer from Mogi to be able to enter the forum. On the day of the court hearing, he barely looked at my face. I couldn't understand anything that was happening. I wasn't sure if he had a lover, or if he did this because he wanted to. He didn't justify anything to me. Then, out of nowhere, a friend of mine was in the market and saw something interesting. He sent me a photo of my ex. I'll share a hidden photo with you. When he showed the photos to his colleague, who was there with his son, I learned that he had married her and had a son. He didn't know either, but later he discovered that she had been lying to him the whole time. When I separated, I got sick and ended up in the hospital. She stayed with me there, and I forgot to. I'll share a hidden photo with you here. When he showed it to his colleague, who was also a professor, she was next to him with her son. I later found out that she had married him and had a son. He didn't know either of them. He didn't suspect anything right away, but he did suspect later on. It was all part of the plot. She had been together with him the whole time. When I separated, I got sick and ended up in the hospital. She stayed with me there. I forgot to tell you this part, because I was very sick and I was hospitalized. She stayed with me the whole time, monitoring all the time. I was almost hospitalized in a psychiatric clinic, because she told everyone that I was crazy and had to be hospitalized. I was crazy, right? The context was to pass to PSOEs that I wasn't doing well psychologically, so that they could do everything under the table. Then I was crazy. I saw things. It was the context until it was. She managed to marry, I'll tell you. She was a real angel, staying with me the whole time, watching over me like a hawk. She even told everyone I was crazy, and that I had to go to the psychiatric clinic. I was just trying to get through it, you know, so they could help me. But they thought I was crazy. I saw things, and it was all because of the whole situation. But she managed to marry him and have a son, and they are still together today. After everything, I suffered a lot. People looked at me like I had betrayed him, like I was the wrong one, because he's a family man and studied so hard. But the mistake is that she came from the street, and she built her life from the ground up. She was always so kind and humble, and he's not a guy who studied at university, or was an engineer. Imagine, when I found out everything. With her, all the photos were just pushing A. I was so happy to be expecting a baby with him, and I was excited to be a father. She was so supportive, even getting me vitamins to help me get pregnant. She was always there for me, and she knew I was taking care of her. When I came back from my trip, she was there, and I felt so grateful. I was so excited to start a family with her. She was so kind, always sending me photos of her son and telling me how happy he was making her. She even sent me some vitamins to help me get pregnant, saying they were just vitamins from a pharmaceutical lab. She was so supportive, always telling me that I was doing the right thing. When I came back from my trip, she was so happy for me, and I could tell she was going to have a baby. She was talking about her and him, because everything was already set up for us. She was so excited for me, and I didn't understand at the time. Today, I can see how happy she was going to be. She was so focused on her own joy, and not on mine. I saw her after that, but she wasn't around anymore. We were going to be so happy when the baby was born. They were talking about her and him, because everything was already forwarded to them. If I was pregnant with him in Verdera, she understood. She only gave me what was going to happen. At the time, I didn't understand. Today, I can understand what this great happiness she said I was going to have. It was about her, not me. I saw her because she disappeared. She blocked me. She disappeared. Even her ex-husband said she disappeared from Osasco. Until then, she sent a picture of her son to a cousin of his, all happy that I had had a son. If that were the most normal thing in the world, I got married and had a child. I sent a photo to the relative. He told me that a person in his family had come to me to look for her, because they weren't understanding what had happened. They knew her because she was always. I was right, and then there was a person who said sorry, saying that they didn't know why. They thought it was me, but I said, no, you don't have to blame me. You were deceived, just like I was. We were all deceived, so I won't judge you for having me judged. But one day, the truth will come out, and no one will be able to hide it forever. One day, the truth will come out, and it will all be revealed. I was approached by a person who apologized, saying they didn't know why. They thought they had made a mistake, but I assured them that wasn't the case. I said, you don't have to blame yourself. You were also deceived, just like I was. We were all deceived, so I won't judge you for being judged. But one day, the truth will come out, and no one will be able to hide it forever. One day, the truth will come out, and it will all be revealed. Dank, you suffered so much. I suffered too. I was very hurt. I didn't want to leave home. I felt ashamed of people. Oh well for me. They laughed at my face, because it happened to many. Many laughed, and many were sympathetic to my history. But many people thought it was well done, because until then, I had a perfect life. It was all beautiful, and everything was wonderful, and suddenly it became a hell. I was on one side, and the other side was without. I had a really hard time, and I'm so grateful that I had the support of my friends and family. I was in a really tough spot, and it was hard to leave home. I felt ashamed, and people laughed at me, but I had a lot of friends who were really supportive. They told me that I was doing the right thing, because I had a perfect life before, and it was all great. But then, everything changed. I was in a really tough spot, and I didn't have any support. I didn't have any clothes, no job, no money, and no job. I had to share an apartment with 2 other men, and I had to find a way to make money. Thankfully, they were really supportive, and their mother was too. She's still my friend today, and she's been really helpful. I'm also friends with some other people who helped me out, like Solidar. I had to face some hard times at home, like not having clothes, not having support, and not having money or a job. I had to share an apartment with 2 other men, and they were like brothers to me. I'm so grateful to them. Their mom, who's from BH, also helped me a lot. She stayed with me, giving me support and affection. We're still friends today, and she's been a huge help to me. I also had some other people who showed up later, like Solidar, who helped me out. They helped me get through it all. I had to be strong and determined to leave it all behind. Even in the middle of it all, they told me, look, he married her today, and I had to be strong. They had a son, and I had to be stronger. She tried to talk to my friends, but they wouldn't. I'm so grateful for the support I received, but I had to find my own strength to get through it. I had to muster the courage to leave it all behind and move forward. Even in the midst of my journey, I was told, he's married her today, and I had to find a way to move on. I had to be strong for my son. I had to be resilient. She tried to reach out to my friends, wanting to discuss me. This person said no. I understand Marie and her actions. It's not easy. You came here to discuss her, and show people that I was wrong. You tried to tarnish my reputation, and make people see me as someone who doesn't deserve respect. You tried to make people believe that we weren't together, that she didn't love me. I know Marie, and I understand her. It's not easy, but you have to be strong. You come here to talk about her, to show people that what they were doing was wrong and that I was right. They tried to tarnish my reputation, see if you can. They tried to make people think badly of me, so that we would be very kind to each other. But she didn't. She put the focus on me as if I were the worst person in the world. We need to understand that I had done something very serious, and that I had attracted people who didn't understand. So this image they wanted to pass on to me. We're together, but she doesn't. It just didn't stick. Then, after 8 years at sea, I had to battle a lot against myself, because sometimes our minds tells us different things, and sometimes we get stuck in the past. If we don't watch over each other, we continue there. So I decided to turn. I had to understand that I was the worst person in the world to the people I had attracted. I had done something very wrong. This image they wanted, us together, but she didn't. It just didn't stick. Then, after 8 years at sea, I had to battle a lot against myself, because sometimes our minds play tricks on us, and sometimes we get stuck in the past. If we don't watch out, people continue on that path, so I decided to turn over a new leaf. It's easy to say, but it's not easy. Nobody gets over a betrayal like this. It's a lie that nobody can quickly get out of suffering. Even today, the sea still fights against feelings. It was very hard for me to get involved with other people, because I always found myself fooling myself and betraying myself. I ended up closing the door to other sea relationships. Today, after 8 years, I managed to open this door because until then, it was closed. The page is easy, I'll say that it's not easy. Nobody recovers quickly from such a betrayal. It's a lie. Nobody can escape suffering quickly. Even today, it's still hard for me to connect with other people. I always felt like I was fooling myself and betraying myself. I ended up closing the door to other sea relationships for 8 years. I couldn't open it because I was afraid of going through humiliation and shame. To this day, I fight a little easier, but every day is a struggle. We can overcome what we don't forget, but I didn't understand that. I've overcome, but I'll never forget what I went through. I remember the day I stayed on the street, and the day I arrived at my house. I had nothing. I had to sell my wedding ring and the clothes on my back. I'm still dealing with the aftermath of that experience, and it's something I'll always carry with me. But I'm also learning to move forward and find strength in myself. I've come to understand that we can't always depend on others, we have to rely on ourselves. That's a lesson I've learned the hard way. If something happens, you have to find the strength to keep going. I was completely dependent on him, and I'm determined to never go back to that. Now, I'm learning to depend on myself. I'm so glad you're here today, Marie. I'm happy to share some insights that have helped me grow. First, if you're thinking about breaking up with your partner, it's important to remember that you're not alone. I know it's hard, and I'm here to support you. I made a mistake in the past, and it led to some tough times. But I'm here to tell you that you're not alone, and you can make it through. Another thing I want to share is that I've learned the importance of self-reliance. When you're in a relationship, it's easy to get caught up in the appearance of things. But I want you to know that you don't have to be dependent on anyone. I've been there, and I've learned from my mistakes. I'm here to support you on your journey to becoming more independent. I know it's hard, but I'd like to offer you some advice for your situation. If you're feeling trapped in a relationship, it might be time to consider separating. I've been there, and I understand how difficult it can be. But I'm here to support you. If you're ready to be independent, you'll be much happier. Remember, being with someone who makes you unhappy is not a good choice. I'm here to support you on your journey to independence. I made a mistake in the past, and I'm here to help you avoid it. I'm not going to lose you, and I'm here to support you. If you're ready to be independent, I'm here to help you find a wonderful therapist. He's not going to charge you for sessions, because he wants to help you. I'm so glad you're asking about being independent. It's great to be independent, and it's good to be with someone who's also independent. But if you're not independent, it's important to be with someone who is. I'm so glad I'm independent, because I had a really hard time when I depended on someone who was unhappy. I couldn't do anything. I had no support, and I couldn't do therapy. I'm so glad I found a therapist who's wonderful. He's 46, and he's even free to see me. He's heard my story, and he helps me. Every time he calls me, he wants to know how I am. I go to him, and I do the 46-year-old sessions that I discovered. I was ashamed of my life, and I was afraid to talk to anyone. I was afraid they would judge me. I'm so glad I'm independent, and I'm glad I'm with someone who is too. You know, when he was going through his own stuff, he'd always be there for me. It's like he was my support system, you know. He'd always ask how I was doing, and I'd tell him all about my sessions. I started doing these 46-year-old sessions, and it was like a therapy that made me realize that I didn't have to be ashamed of my life. I was so scared to talk about it, afraid that someone would judge me, but he was there for me. In the first session, I could tell he was really listening to me, like a friend was right there with me. It was so helpful, and it made me realize that it's okay to talk about your feelings with people who care. They might not be as emotional as you are, but they'll still understand. Even the person who's been studying all this will be able to listen to you and point out where you might be missing something, or where you're doing well. In the first session, I could tell it was something natural, as if a friend was just talking to me. It was so interesting, because it was more rational. When you tell your story to people close to you, they're often very emotional and less rational. They might say, "You have to do that. You're going to break everything." Even the person who is out there studying this will be rational with you and point out where you might have missed or gotten it right. We only want to hear about the things we get right, because we act a lot on emotion, not reason. Maybe if I had gone to my wedding in the past, I could have given some things I shouldn't have. I stuck a woman in my house, thinking she was my best friend. I never thought she would do that. You're giving a weapon to the enemy. Unfortunately, I'll say that's all because otherwise, you'll talk. I'm not trying to point fingers, but I have a friend who's going through a divorce. I don't think it's fair to say that my friend is leaving with my husband. But it's important to be careful and set boundaries. You can have friends, but you need to be careful about how much you share. I didn't have any boundaries, and it was a lot for me to handle. I was talking about everything I did, my plans, and my dreams. I was sharing everything with my husband, and I was doing everything with so much innocence. This can't be done. I'm a bit embarrassed to say that I didn't realize my actions might be misinterpreted. I thought my friend was leaving with my husband, but it turns out that's not the case. I should have been more attentive and set boundaries. I had a lot of friends, but I didn't have any limits. I shared everything with my husband, from my plans to my dreams and where I was going. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I didn't realize how I was acting. I've learned my lesson, and I'm grateful for that. Music. I hope you'll enjoy this story. If you're going through a divorce or in a relationship that's not working out, please consider joining our community. We're a tight-knit group of women who support each other through divorce and help prevent trauma. You can find more information in our description.